Joe's been a high-tech executive and CEO the last 28 years. He was the CEO of Cadence Design Systems, and you guys advanced beyond that. So, Joe.
Thank you. So I left design automation in 1998, and when I left, I was going to go run a company called Knowledge Universe, and the whole idea with Knowledge Universe was to revolutionize education. That lasted 3 months, not because we got the revolution completed in that amount of time, but it wasn't the right place for me. But in 2000, I actually started an incubator to focus on technologies that could revolutionize education. The company didn't work, but I still was intrigued by the idea, and so I started this incubator. It's interesting how paths, wind around. So that's 17 years ago when I did that, and here I am giving this talk because I'll tell you exactly how that happened. So Mac gave me a call sometime early in the year and said, hey, we're going to do IoT at the Design Automation Conference. Could you give a keynote? Because I was working on IoT, and I said, sure. So that's how I got here today. But I'll fill in a few of the blanks in between. So this incubator I started in 2000. It was focused on technologies that can revolutionize education. But I had a rule about an incubator is let engineers play, do their own thing. So I said 20% of the time, the engineers could do whatever they wanted in this incubator. They didn't have to report to anything, keep on track, just do what you want. The guy that was heading that incubator, a guy named Luke Julia, who today is actually running a big part of Samsung's Innovation Center on the West Coast, he had an incredible mind. And one of the things he started playing around with in the year 2000 was this was during the boom in the internet. That was the revolution that was happening at that time. And he started thinking about, but this internet is just with computers today. There's a whole set of things in the world. What is going to happen? How are you going to get all those things connected? And so he said, I want to spend some time on that. So he went off and spent the next few years, from 2000 to 2004, looking at building platforms that could connect all the things in your life, all the things in the world, to the internet, what would now be called the Internet of Things. Now, by the way, he created some unbelievably cool demos. We had a little robot that would meet you when you came to the office and take your picture, log you in. You could ask it with speech. You could ask it to make your presentation, put it up on any screen, any kind of television screen, computer screen. It kept track. We had keeping track of everything that went in and out of the refrigerator. So actually, when you went to the grocery store, it would email or actually text you a list of what you needed. It kept track of what was low and what was missing from those things. It could also do things like you could tell the kinds of articles you might be interested in. It would check through your favorite publications, scan those articles, and while you were driving to work, you could have it read those to you over the phone. So some incredible stuff. And by the way, this is in 2001, 2002, 2003. But to remind you where we were at that time, there was no iPhone. So when we decided actually to kill the work on this in 2004 because we didn't see a path to market. And the reason was the infrastructure wasn't there at the time. Remember, iPhone was 2007. We killed this in 2004. There was no cloud, or at least people's clouds were things they built. There was no AWS from Amazon or anything like that from Google or Microsoft. And when you're too early, and there's even Wi-Fi, by the way, was not universally available. And when you're too early on things and there's no infrastructure, it makes it hard. We couldn't figure out all these cool demos. How are you ever going to make that happen in a mass way? And that's why we said, let's just put it to bed. We'll put it in suspended animation and wait to the time that it might actually make some sense. So now, I got involved, again, before the Internet of Things was the Internet of Things, and so I've watched it over the last decade and what people have been doing. And there's been a tremendous amount of hype about the Internet of Things. And I'll tell you, most of that hype is a bunch of bullshit, right? It's not true, by the way. What they've said, it's just not going to be. And having spent years thinking about this, you kind of get an idea of what's going to work and what's not going to work. Now, in 2014, almost exactly 3 years ago, I joined the company Enlighted to be the CEO. And Enlighted is an Internet of Things company, and I'll tell you about that in a moment. So it's not that I didn't believe in the Internet of Things. I believed in it back in 2001 through 4 when we were fooling around this incubator. In fact, my belief is that the Internet of Things is actually going to be bigger than anything we've seen before. The internet boom was tremendous. Everybody looks at that as possibly the biggest revolution that we've had in technology. The Internet of Things is going to be bigger. And actually, it's going to be more important for the group of people here than I think anything before. Actually, the internet, in some ways, was a little bit, you could say, of a negative for the design industry. It actually created a tremendous amount of consolidation in the industry. If you think about it, it was about, in the beginning, the internet was about desktop computers and a little bit of laptops and connected a little bit to servers, and then over time it became just laptops and servers, and then the mobile phone revolution came along and smartphones with the iPhone, and it was just the iPhone. And then there was this consolidation of vendors. So then it's become just laptops, maybe not so much, and tablets and smartphones. And the numbers of components and vendors that are successful has gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. So instead of diversification, there's been a tremendous consolidation driven by this internet technology. The Internet of Things is going to be exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite. This is going to be a great time for design and design automation, because there will be a tremendous proliferation caused by the Internet of Things. Why? There is a tremendous diversity of things. There's not going to be the same consolidation. And everything, and you'll see as we talk a little bit more about this, everything has different requirements. Different technologies are required to create that Internet of Things experience because of the size and the shape and the needs. Communication requirements, sensor requirements are all different for all classes of things. And so where we have seen with the internet this tremendous consolidation, I think there's going to be a tremendous proliferation that is created in design with the Internet of Things. And that's going to make a great next decade, and I will tell you, it's going to be way bigger than the internet ever was. So let's talk about the Internet of Things. I'll give you my condensed version of what I've learned over the last 15 years playing in the Internet of Things. It's not perfect. You know, it's still the beginning of this industry, so there's only some lessons that have been learned. You'll have to learn a lot more about what opportunities are there. I'm going to tell you about a lot of the roadblocks and things you ran into that didn't work. And you'll learn a lot more in the next decade as this market evolves. Now, I had my first boss actually had this thing. He was a funny guy, Jim Moyer, National Semiconductor, and he used to, when everybody was arguing about things, he'd say, "Stop, stop, stop." He goes, "High order bit, high order bit." You get the high order bit right, pretty much everything works out right. You get it wrong, pretty much everything works out wrong. Focus on the high order bit. So in the Internet of Things, the high order bit is this. The most important decision you make in the Internet of Things is what thing you pick. Now that sounds obvious, right? It's the Internet of Things. Picking the thing seems like it would be an important thing, but that's actually where most people screw up in the Internet of Things. Right there at the high order bit, that first decision. Let me give you a couple examples. There have been 4 or 5 companies that have been funded to create IoT, Internet of Things, dog food supply or bowls, right? Seriously, you know, they got real venture money, they got funded to do this. Now, I'm not saying that's a terrible idea, but I will tell you, that's not it. That's not a great marketplace. I'll come back and talk a little bit more. Here's another one. There are 7 companies that got funded Internet of Things sprinkler systems for your home. Again, it's not that that's a terrible idea, but here's the problem with it. The truth is, just like the internet, you can learn from past history. Remember in the internet, there was going to be an internet company for every product on the planet? You know, there were 4 or 5 pet food companies online at a certain point, all of which went broke, by the way. Because everyone, oh boy, you know, let's make a company on the internet, because Amazon did books, you know, we'll do underwear, dog food, you know, whatever it is. It didn't work out that way. The internet became a feature of every company at a certain point. And that's going to be true of the vast majority of things in the Internet of Things. The Internet of Things will become a feature of products. So everything will get connected. By the way, it will touch everything. Everything will have an internet connection. It will be part of the Internet of Things. But it doesn't necessarily make for a good separate company or a good separate market. Mostly, it's going to become a feature of those products. Now that said, there will be, just like with the internet, there will be some blockbusters. There are going to be some companies like the Googles, the Facebooks, the Apples, the Amazons that actually change the world in a fundamental way based on this Internet of Things technology. So let's take a look at where that might come from. But before I do that, I'll hit another mistake people make in this Internet of Things. Internet of Things, it's not so simple. When you get a buzzword like that, everybody likes to attach to it. Everybody can, oh yeah, let's make, well, I'll put that label on, that ought to make my company sexy and hot. So I'm an Internet of Things company too. But one of the key things you can measure about this is the Internet of Things, yes, you got to pick the right thing, and we'll hit some of those categories that make some sense, but it's also about intelligence. And I'll give you an example of this. So here's the Nest. How many of you have a Nest thermostat out there? A bunch of people. A hot thing. This was an Internet of Things. One of the, quote, original Internet of Things plays was the Nest thermostat. This is Internet of Things 0.1. This doesn't even get to 0.5. It certainly is not 1.0. I'll give you a perfect example. We actually remodeled our house, and when we got remodeled, they put in Nest thermostats. And we used it for a while. And about a month into it, my wife tells me, she goes, I hate those things. Can you get rid of those Nest thermostats? And I say, why, honey? They're hot. That's the hottest product. It's Internet of Things. I'm an Internet of Things guy, right? She goes, no, they're terrible. And I said, why do you think they're so terrible? And she goes, listen, really, I want to change the temperature. I first have to find my mobile phone. Then I have to get to the app. Then I have to get to the thermostat I want to change. And then I weave through the navigation and get to the right temperature. She said, by that time, I could have walked through the whole house and changed the temperature on every one of the Honeywell thermostats, right? I want those back. This is a fundamental problem, right? The problem with the Internet of Things with this kind of device, and here's another example. This is the Philips Hue, right? They gave you control. They allow you to use an iPhone or any kind of smart device to control it. It gives you a connection. That's not the Internet of Things. That is just controlling. That's why I call it 0.1. No, if you want to be an Internet of Things device, you've got to have intelligence to it. I say maybe you should think about it as IQ OT. If you want to have a little mnemonic there to remember, is that a smart idea or not a smart idea? Well, there better be some intelligence. There's got to be data and processing to create some intelligent action, not have the human sit and make all those intelligence decisions. That doesn't make any sense in this Internet of Things. So let's talk about some categories that start to make sense. When you pick your thing, it's got to be a big enough thing. It's got to be a big enough market opportunity, not pet food bowls, no, or sprinklers. Those are going to be features. Something larger. So here's a consumer product, that whole category of Fitbit things. It's actually created large enough things. Now that's a market that's maybe big enough, maybe, to make something happen here. Definitely, by the way, IoT for healthcare is going to be big. I guarantee you that. Whether this is the right category or not, I don't know, but that's certainly a fundamentally big enough market that it could justify it, and you can create intelligence from gathering new rich data, processing it, and delivering interesting results and feedback to their users. Here's another example. This one is, by the way, on the industrial side. So this is, I think, one of the most successful companies to date in the Internet of Things has been General Electric. They've done some phenomenal things. What they did is they censored up all of their large equipment. So locomotives, jet engines, they did turbines, all of their big equipment, put sensors in there. And by the way, what was the idea? They put sensors in, gathered that data, and they turned a reactive prophylactic service business, where it's either they fix it when it broke, or they tried to put a schedule on to fix it before it broke. Now with sensor data, guess what? It's proactive. They can tell when things are messed up or close to messed up, and they do proactive service. In the jet engine business alone, in the first 3 years, they're saving $1 billion a year in service. $1 billion a year, and the customers are getting better service. Now that's powerful. That's something big enough to make a real difference. So that's the kind of market that can make a real change, and you can see the economic impact it's going to have in just those few categories. So what about Enlighted? I'll tell you a little bit about, we'll go into that story as an illustration. It's not perfect, but I'm going to try to pull out the abstractions from it so it would make sense for other businesses. What's Enlighted? Enlighted is the Internet of Things for commercial real estate. So that's our thing, commercial real estate. That was a good choice. By the way, not my choice. The founder of this company, brilliant guy, Tanuj Mohan, he invented this, came up with this idea in 2009, end of 2009, 2010 is when he started the company. And he had this thought, what if you created a system for making the building, your commercial real estate, into a connected object that was intelligent? That was his idea. The thing was commercial real estate. Now, by the way, that's a great thing. Commercial real estate is arguably at least in the top 3 asset classes on the planet Earth. It might be the biggest asset class on planet Earth, so it's huge, a good choice. Tanuj got that one right. Not dog food bowls, this is big. Commercial real estate. That was his first idea here. Now, what's it mean, though, like with the jet engine, I just told you jet engines, turbines, what that meant to turn it, to do Internet of Things. What's it mean for commercial real estate, for building? Well, what we do is we create sensory systems for those buildings. That's the idea. The fundamental vehicle for the Internet of Things for commercial real estate. And by the way, the fundamental vehicle for almost everything in the Internet of Things is create a sensory system for a previously inanimate object. All right, so here we create sensory systems for buildings, but it could be sensory system for anything for the Internet of Things. Now let me describe what that means. I use the analogy. A lot of analogies are kind of crappy. They're not that good. They're just kind of an indication. In this case, the analogy of the sensory system for the human body and the sensory system for a building is really good. And generally, the sensory system analogy for the Internet of Things is pretty good. What's the sensory system for the human body? I used here the sense of touch. In the sense of touch, you have all of your touch sensors spread throughout your skin organ over your entire body. Right? That's how the sense of touch works. And those things are sitting there gathering information. Of course, they have to put that, eventually get the information to the brain. So you have a nervous system, peripheral nerves, go to your spine, up your spine to the brain. So you have to have a fundamental transmission system for that data. And then finally, the brain. The brain does two things. It provides storage, all the data that's being gathered, so you have memory, and the processing power, the applications you're going to run on top of that to take action on all of that data that you're getting from the sensory system. That's the fundamental structure for a human sensory system. Every fundamental, interesting, cool IoT thing is going to have a sensory system that looks something like that. Sensors, gathering rich data, transmission systems, and some kind of cloud infrastructure. By the way, the brain for the Internet of Things is the cloud, not the brain, where you're going to have memory, storage, and applications to take action on things. Now, let me bring it down to, make it more precise for a sensory system for a building so you get an actual picture of what you do. So we put sensor modules, one sensor module, at every single light fixture in a building. So when I said, you're putting sensor modules through the skin instead of the skin of the human, through the skin of the building, that's where we put it in the skin. One sensor module, every single light fixture in the building. That gets it evenly distributed. We'll come back and talk about how smart that idea was. That was a Tanuj idea, a great idea. By the way, these sensor modules, they're not, this is not, have you ever been in a building, that has one of those lighting control systems, and you're sitting there type on your computer for a while, and the lights go out, then then the lights go back on. It's not a dumbass sensor system like that. That's that's like not even 0.1 IoT. These are real sensory systems and modules. The processing power in every single one of the sensor modules is about the same as the original iPhone. So imagine that. We're putting an original iPhone at every single light fixture in the building. There's a light fixture every 100 square feet. So it's a network of processors like that. Now you got this network of processors. Each sensor module, by the way, has 7 sensors inside of it, gathering data. The key isn't the sensors, it's the digital signal processing you do on top of that with the processor in that module. Take that data, grind in that data, gather insights, and one other key thing you have to do, compress the data, because I'll tell you, in our largest building complex, we have 22,000 of those sensor modules in one building complex. If you ship that data raw, you would overwhelm any wireless system known to man, or probably that will be invented in the next 10 years, right? So huge amounts of data. You have to do compression to just send information, not raw data. So that's the idea. We have a wireless transmission system. It has to be very specialized to handle this huge volume of data even after it's been compressed. So that's the second piece of it. And then you ship that data to the cloud. By the way, there's a second little thing. We put there's something we call an energy manager. You can see there down in the middle. That's kind of, sometimes you have mission critical activities, so having it in the cloud doesn't work if you need real-time action in an emergency room. So you have to have some local storage so you don't ever get cut off if there's an internet connection problem. So the cloud is sometimes distributed. Sometimes it's up in the cloud with an Amazon or a Google or Microsoft. Sometimes it's on site in a computer. That's the structure, the set of things. That's how we deliver the Internet of Things sensory system for a building. Looks like that. Now I'm going to say a couple things here. I said it before, we put one of these sensors at every light. Brilliant idea by Tanuj. Why? Because, first of all, lights have power, and batteries for sensors are a bitch, because they're always dying, and you don't know when they die or where they die, and it screws up your whole data gathering. So having a sensor at a lighting element is fantastic, because you always have power. You never have to worry about batteries. So that's fantastic, a really good thing. Even more important, the sensory system being attached to a light, it's perfect spatial density. If you put one at every light fixture, it means you can see the entire building by law, because you have to light every square foot of the building. So if I have a sensor module looking down from every single light fixture, I can see the whole building. So perfect spatial density, power. There was one other brilliant thing of Tanuj's, and this is important, the pragmatism. He goes, look, who puts light fixtures in? They are not PhDs, and they're not engineers. And you don't want them to have to do any design work. They don't have to, or follow any design work. It's got to be dumbass simple. One at every light fixture is a perfect design element for that. There's no choice. You put one at every single light. There's no design at all. It's that simple. Super important in this picture. Now, the second part of this that was really interesting on the lighting side of things. Now, by the way, I forgot to mention the last one, but I'll say it here. The lighting, the first application Tanuj wrote was saving energy. So actually, we give intelligence, we give a little piece of our processor as the brain for every single light fixture. And we produce the most efficient and functionally great light you've ever seen, because every single light now has a little brain. Before, lights didn't have a brain. Now every single one of these lights has a little brain. That does two things, makes a really good light, but also saves a ton of money. And that money, this is just luck, by the way, that money is about the right amount of money to pay for the installation of the sensory system. So that's kind of the symbiotic relationship between lights and our system. But be very clear, they're two different things. There's a sensory system, there's a lighting system. We hooked them up because there were some mutually beneficial things to put them together. The cash we get, the intelligent lighting, but on the flip side, we get power and position. So that was the idea here between them. Now, that said, the key here is it's still Internet of Things of commercial real estate, not lighting. This is about commercial real estate. And so you're gathering those data. Remember I told you those sensor modules, each one has 7 sensors in it. Gathering data, processing continuously like that. Those are gathering data about the building, everything about the building, not just lights, heat, temperature, all the physical attributes, but more important, all the human activity inside it. Those sensor modules, actually what they produce is the best way to describe it. You ever see one of those old science fiction movies, like when the aliens come to Earth, and for whatever reason they can travel millions of light years, but they don't have good vision. They see heat blobs, right? So they only can see heat blobs moving around. That's kind of what our sensor modules see. We don't have cameras at every single one of these things, so you don't have anything that privacy invasive, right? But we see heat blobs. Actually, you could call them color-coded heat blobs moving around. That's one of the things when we do our signal processing we see. We see heat blobs moving around. By the way, that's exactly why you don't wave your arms when our system is in there. You don't have to sit and wave your arms. It knows how many heat blobs are sitting in the room. There's still heat blobs in the room. It keeps the lights on, right? So it's a completely different kind of processing. This data that we provide is what enables you to produce much richer applications than just those first ones. So there's a plethora of applications. Once you're gathering this kind of data on the building environment, you can do all kinds of things. And I'll give you a few examples of this. But by the way, I'm giving you the example for buildings, but the same thing works in other spaces. You gather new rich data and you process it intelligently, you can gain new insights about any inanimate object in the world. Just pick a decent one, not a tiny one. So let's talk about some of the examples. Here's space. One of the applications we built, we call it space. It's for space planning. We know, real time, all the time, exactly how many people are at every single part of the building. All those heat blobs. We see them real time, moving around. You can count them. You can see where they are. I have a perfect picture of how your building is being used. Now, I'm going to make a comment here that's super important. The original energy applications we did, their value was a few cents per square foot in a building, right? So the energy stuff's worth a couple of cents a square foot, which is not trivial because there's lots of square feet. These applications, space in the United States, cost people about $3 per square foot. So it's 100 times more valuable than energy. So it's the non-energy things, it's the ones that affect what people are doing in buildings that really make a difference. So this one, I'll give you an example. I met with the CFO at Apple. And the CFO at Apple, his real estate guys had told us, I don't know if we need these fancy space applications. Come on. You know, his word was, we're running hot at Apple. We're running hot. We just need new buildings. We're running out of space all the time. We got to hire new people, build new buildings, remodel, rent. That's what we do. We don't need any data to tell us about the fact that we're running out of space. I said, okay. So we went and showed Luca, the CFO. We took 2 buildings. We've done about 2.5 million square feet there. We took 2 buildings, 450,000 square feet. He's looking at this and seeing the heat blobs moving around. He's like, well, this is pretty incredible, what the data you have. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. As he gets into it, then we panned back to a dashboard, and it showed him his utilization of his space. And he's looking at this, and he goes, does that say this building is used 40% of the time? I said, that's exactly what it says. And he goes, well, that's not very good, is it? And I said, no, that's actually not very good. And he turned to his real estate guy, and he goes, I've told you how many times? That was my instinct. We say we're running hot. We're not. I could tell these aren't utilized. I want this for every single one of my buildings in my entire portfolio. Why? Because real estate is one of the largest, if not the largest, capital investment any CFO makes, and they have no data on how it's actually utilized. Hugely important. Here's a second one. I give this one. We have an application for conference rooms. Conference rooms are the most contested space in any kind of building or commercial environment. And by the way, what's the way people manage conference rooms? Scheduling system. Guess what the worst problem with conference room management is? Scheduling systems, because they cause overbooking. What do when you want to guarantee that you have a conference room? Overbook, right? And overbooking tends to lead to more overbooking. And if you look at the actual utilization of conference rooms, it's terrible because people book them and they don't use them. Well, this is a feedback mechanism because you can see all the time exactly not only how they're used, but even who's using them if you want to do that. I'll give you another example. Hospitals. This is a hot marketplace here. I'll give you the insight. I talked to the CEO at a hospital. And the idea is to give you a sense for the power that when you get new data, how it changes things. And he's a very nice Midwestern guy, and he goes, Joe, I want to tell you, I don't really care that much about your energy stuff. I said, okay, so what are you excited about? And he goes, I think that your system can track, the way it can do asset tracking, track people and things, will revolutionize hospitals completely. And I go, why is that so important to you? He goes, I'll give you one example. He said, in North America, we did a study. We were part of a complete across-the-country study. Nurses spend an average of an hour a day looking for equipment. An hour a day. It's insane that we're wasting that kind of time. We need to be able to see where stuff is, real time, so that nurses don't have to waste an hour of their time. He goes, it's worse than you're thinking, too, because the nurses actually, they hate it, right? So it's a negative for them personally. They want to take care of people, not look for equipment. And yes, indeed, we can track equipment. By the way we do that, when the equipment doesn't have it, we put a little Bluetooth tag on it. The new Bluetooth low energy is low enough in energy that you can actually run those things for 5 years on batteries. And so we have Bluetooth receivers and beacons in every one of those sensor modules so we can see not just visible light, not just infrared, we can also see in Bluetooth and keep track of every single thing and solve this problem completely, something they've been trying to do for 15 years in hospitals. By the way, in that picture, the very first thing he had us track was wheelchairs. And I thought, oh, that's goofy. I said, he probably gave us wheelchairs because we couldn't screw it up. He's like, what the hell, right? It's a wheelchair. I thought he was going to give us something complicated like an MRI machine or, nope, wheelchairs, right? I was okay, so later I asked him, I said, did you give us wheelchairs just because you thought we'd screw it up? And he goes, no, those wheelchairs, they're important, those wheelchairs. And he goes, you can't leave a hospital in most post-op situations, if you're not in a wheelchair. And he goes, single-digit percentage of the time, people are either overnight or 4 hours late because we couldn't find a wheelchair. So that's real. That's a real example of things here. Here's another one, retail. We can do stuff in retail. We can track, we can track people and things in the retail environment. Why is that important? Well, I talked to a really high-end retail guy, bricks and mortar retail guy, and he said, listen, have you ever looked at our website? And I said, actually, no. But, and he goes, well, I'll tell you, it's terrible. We're top 10 bricks and mortar. We're probably bottom 20% on our website. He said, on my website, I'm bottom 20%. And he goes, I know when you come to my website, I know where you came from. I know exactly what you do on my site. I know what you look at, how long you look at it, what you put in your basket or not in basket. When you leave, I can test to see where you go. I can try ad campaigns against you. He said, and I'm in the bottom 20 percentile on that. He said, I'm in the top 10 retailer, bricks and mortar in the world. What do I know about you when you come in my store? Nothing. I don't know anything until you check out. And then only if you pay with a credit card. If you paid cash, I knew nothing about you. That gap in information is enormous between bricks and mortar and the internet. Now you probably are thinking, Joe, note to Joe, retail's dead. So you're focusing on the wrong problem here, right? They're all dying, Joe, come on, get with it. No, I've got the other side of retail covered too. The other side of retail is warehouses, right? And being able to really find things quickly inside warehouses. Same thing, warehouses are manufacturing. People need to track everything all the time. My last retail slide, see this? They're looking for the drones coming in. Actually, that's not true. This is an elevator application. You can actually make incredibly intelligent elevators. When you have a sensory system that tells you where everybody is in a building all the time, you can make incredibly efficient elevators, reducing your wait time and energy consumption on those. So that's a picture of the kind of thing we do. Now, the key in all of this, I said at the beginning, pick the right thing, make sure you're gathering the data, intelligent data, and processing it. But I want to make the key distinction here. The data is the critical thing. The gold here is that data. And believe it or not, people miss that in this business. They forget the fact that there's nothing without the data. The data is the crude oil of this next generation machine age. The machine age, next generation is the IoT machine age. You know, the first one, oil, was the critical component of this. Here, the data is the real gold. That's the thing that's going to drive this next generation of this. If you don't believe me, this is a recent cover of The Economist. And that was their front cover, which I think is amazing. So here's a general economics, high-end economic magazine. It's on there, but I'll tell you, I meet people all the time in technology and products who have not gotten the message. This is about the data. Make sure whatever you're doing, you're getting the right data, and protect it like crazy, because that's where the real value in this is. Now, the other thing, so without data, by the way, you got nothing, really nothing. But you also have to do something with it. By the way, when I say you have nothing, and I won't name names here, but several of the big AI machine learning companies have come to talk to us. And when they came to talk to us, funny conversation, very awkward, and well, what is it you want? Your data. We want your data, right? And why? Well, they've got these incredibly powerful tools. There's nothing to work with with their tools. They need our data. Well, I'm not going to give them my data. Screw you. So we don't do that. You don't want to give up your most valuable thing, your data. But that is where the core thing is. If you don't have the data, it doesn't matter how fancy your tools are, you're not going to get anything done. Now, the flip side of it is, you got to do something with it. Just having the data is no good. I gave you some examples before, things we've been doing, energy stuff, space planning, asset tracking, people tracking for retail, industrial. There's other stuff too. But the next generation of this is those guys who came to talk to us. It is going to be artificial intelligence and machine learning. This is going to be the next generation. When you have the massive amounts of data that you're generating here, it's the only way that you're going to be able to actually get your arms around this data. Super critical. Now, a slight aside on this. How many of you saw this? This happened like a month ago when the computers and the AI machine learned programs actually beat the Go champion. This is incredible. This Go champion is a 19-year-old kid. So Go is the most difficult, complex strategy game for human beings ever, right? And so this kid, 19 years old, is the best Go player probably in history at 19 years old. He's truly a genius when it comes to Go. He plays the computer, he loses the first round. It's 2 out of 3. Second round, he loses 2. If you read the story of how he lost, he goes, they have hundreds of Go experts and masters watching this. He said he played a perfect game for 100 moves, and then he screwed up. And what happened? He goes, I got excited. I saw that I was going to win. I had a real chance to beat the computer. I got excited, my emotions got ahead of me, and I lost. I was crushed. And he said, listen, I will never play the computer again. The computer is God of Go. I will only play human beings, right? Now, there's something profound about this, by the way. When I read this is a profound moment. You could pick a lot of different profound moments, but machines are now smarter than humans. It's true. This is, for me, this was the iconic moment. This is the time when machines actually surpass human beings. And it's going to be a huge psychological transition and economic transition for human beings as this happens. You know, we've seen how robotics and machines have transformed, displaced labor. That was blue collar, you know, and a lot of the resentment and frustration, et cetera, is what caused Trump to get elected. The next generation of this is going to be white collar people are going to be put out of jobs by machine learning and AI. It will have a profound implications for us all. I remember, and when I read this, actually, I cried. I got sad, I cried a little bit. And I thought, you know, that's ironic. The AI learning machine that was reading the same article probably didn't cry, but probably could have figured out that I would cry when I read it. So that's really the world that we're looking at. And it's going to have profound impact. Now, in the meantime, I will tell you, it's like, don't cry in your beer. You know, you got to move on with this whole thing. The truth is, today, the best Go players are humans coupled with that machine. They beat any human being, and they beat the machine playing alone. That combination, human beings plus AI, is great, and that's what's required in any IoT world. You want to win? You do the very best you can with AI and machine learning, couple it with human intelligence, and you've got a winner. And you've got to invest in that, because that is going to be the future when you have this massive amount of data. And remember, if you're doing it right in IoT, it's about the data, and you're going to get masses of great data. The machine will be better than you are at analyzing it, and you've got to couple human intelligence with machine intelligence if you're going to win in this space. Let's talk a little bit about go-to-market. That's tricky. Going to market in IoT is not a simple thing, I guarantee it. So our goal at Enlighted was, hey, we want to enlighten every building, right? That was the whole idea. And you can say, well, you know, that's arrogant. Every marketing guy says that. But it's more fundamental. It's more fundamental for anybody going into IoT. In IoT, it doesn't matter which category you pick, if you pick buildings or jet engines or whatever. In the end, you're building a sensory system platform for that species of equipment, of machine. That's what you're doing. In the end, they're not going to be 50 or 100 sensory platforms for jet engines or commercial real estate or residential. There's going to be a handful. There's going to be 5 that end up surviving. So it's for real. Like, you go, what are the challenges? The biggest challenge I saw right away when I came to Enlighted was, you got to be one of those last 5 guys standing. And there's hundreds of billions of square feet of real estate. There are 20 billion square feet every year remodeled or built. And you've got to be gigantic if you're going to be a player in the end. Because there's not going to be 100. You can't be the little niche guy with 1 billion square feet. You're going to have to be one of the guys that can be one of the big 5, maybe 10, but probably 5 in any IoT endeavor. So scale is absolutely one of the biggest things by far. Second thing I want to remind you, and this is true, I'm going to use buildings, but it's true of every one. So in buildings, remember, I'm putting a sensor module at every light fixture, right? In the building. Well, that's a different world. I'm in the facilities, electrical contracting facilities world there. And you're in a different space. And in fact, the biggest problem that you have in going to market in this space, it's very true of all IoT, is what I call the divide between OT and IT. OT is in this case, the lighting, HVAC, facilities, infrastructure, and technology. It's 100 years old. These people have been working on these problems for 100 years. That's a very different world, very slow moving. They know how things are done, and they want to keep everybody out of that world. And yet that's where you've got to put in your sensory system. On the other side, the sensory system, look what it is. It's high-end digital signal processing, advanced sensors, advanced wireless, cloud computing, AI, machine learning, holy shit. It's the full-on high-end technology. There is a gigantic gap between these two groups of people. Gigantic gap. Now, by the way, what happened, the OT guys, the people in lighting and HVAC, they've kind of gone, well, this is cool. Every one of them slapped IoT on their name, everyone. I did a review the other day. There are 27 IoT systems from lighting guys. It looks like the first round of America's Got Talent, right? It's the most god-awful shit you've ever seen. It wouldn't get honorable mention in a high school science fair, most of this stuff. But why? It's not really an accident. They don't have the DNA. You know, you think about what you need to succeed there. I need digital signal processing, advanced wireless, cloud computing, databases, AI. This is not the DNA of a lighting or an HVAC company, right? That's why it doesn't work, right? That's why those guys struggle on that. Now, you know, you could say I'm making fun of those guys, but no, I'm gonna go to the other side, the IT guys. I've had all the IT, we are on a regular tour of IT people come wandering through to take a look at our company because we're like the weird animal in the zoo. Like, you know, we're like the two-headed snake. It's like, wow, you're doing industrial IoT and we're like $50 million a year. We're the first really successful company that's been able to make that happen. And they listen to the whole story, they get really excited until they hear that there are guys on ladders putting sensor modules in the ceiling. Oh man, buzzkill. Whoa, you know, I don't want to hear about your guys on the ladders. And literally, most of them say, come back when all those sensors are in and you can give me the data. Are you crazy? We're not going to give you the data. What is it you don't get about the Internet of Things? There's a thing, and you've got to make that thing intelligent. You've got to censor it up. This divide is in every single IoT thing I've seen. There's the existing guys with the thing that have usually spent 10, 20, 50, 100 years developing the thing, and there's the new IT guys, the invaders who want to come in. When I look at the way that they're trying to attack it, this looks like their strategy for the gap, bridging the gap. This is my version of their strategy. Now, it might work, right? Once, might work. It's probably not a scalable model, right, for success in this space. So, what do you really need to do if you're going to bridge the gap? And this is the clue, no matter which IoT thing you're going to do. You have to build that bridge. You've got to get good enough, you know, you come most likely in this room, you come from the IT side. But you've got to build a bridge and you've got to get a good enough understanding of the OT side to actually make that foundation so you understand that well enough. Like, remember I told you Tanuj, brilliant, he said no design. It's got to be one module per light so that you don't have to have people doing design or following the design. You have to bridge the gap and connect with the OT side of the world. Super, super critical. Now, doing that, building a bridge like that is not scalable. You've got to do something more if you're going to scale. And in this slide, I kind of show you, what you have to do over time. You've got to, although you build that bridge, and this is a second super critical thing, you build that bridge, and by the way, that bridge is painful at the beginning to build that bridge. You learn everything about that OT side, and lighting, and electrical contractors, and HVAC people, and how you have to connect and make that happen, and you get the bridge built across. And I will tell you, your job then is to give up most of what you've built for the first 5 years of your company. You've got to give it up. After you've learned how to do it, you have to turn that vertical into a set of horizontals and include everybody in that world. And that's hard. When you spend a lot of time and energy building a vertical path like that, it is tough to give it up and say, I'm going to give that up and let all the horizontal guys play. Now that I've shown the way, I've shown the path, I can take the vertical and turn it horizontal, and that's how you scale. And if you don't scale, you will be crushed in the end. That's critical. Now, go back to the top. Seriously, guys, IoT, I was never going to run a company again. I was done with that. I'd done a lot of that. But this opportunity is the biggest opportunity I'd ever seen at the beginning. It's enormous, and that's what drew me back in and got me involved in Enlighted. It is a phenomenal opportunity in its size, seriously. And for this group of people, engineers, scientists, technologists, product marketing people from technology, it's an embarrassment of riches what's going to happen in this IoT space. And it's going to go the opposite direction, as I said at the beginning, from what we've seen in the internet, which was all about consolidation and fewer players and fewer companies and fewer products, fewer big semiconductor plays. This is going to go the opposite way. There's going to be opportunities everywhere. When I say everywhere, I mean, I threw a list here, Sensors, there's at the sensor level, the chips that go into it, the digital signal processing, both hardware and software. Hey, there's system level stuff at the compute in the server farms, networking of all kinds and descriptions, hardware, software, firmware, AI. It's incredible and rich because every single problem is different. You cannot take my solution in the commercial real estate area and even apply it to residential, right? Every single problem is going to be a bit different. There's going to be a massive proliferation of opportunities in design at all different levels here. And I'll end with one last thing. You know, I started in life professionally as a technology guy, and you know, I will die a technology guy. And the reason I love technology, it is the most positive, revolutionary force, and we're living it. This is, when people look back, this is going to be the golden era of technology that we lived in, right in the heart of it. And the thing about technology that's incredible, you know, and obviously it's fueled by people like people in this room who are inventing, designing, pushing the boundaries, but it's inexorable. It just keeps going and going and going. Any dream you have, technology will eventually make it come true. Think about it. This dream started for me 16, 17 years ago with Luke Julia in that little laboratory up in Emeryville, California. And he was doing all these crazy things. And that dream was unbelievable, but it wasn't yet real because there weren't all the pieces of infrastructure and they weren't at the right price point and power. But look, 15 years later, all that can happen and more. The technology revolution does continue, and it will continue to make dreams come true. And there should be 1,000 dreams that flower in this room around IoT over the next decade. Thanks very much.
I'm going to give you more.
So how was that? You know, I asked Joe to come back and tell us more about dog food, and wow, he hit out of the park, right?
I forgot about that.
Yes, I know. Very good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, some of you got the dog food joke, right? Yes, okay. I'll explain it to you later, anyone who's missing out on that. Okay, well, that was a very enlightening presentation. The floor is opening for exhibits in about 2 or 3 minutes here. DAC has started, and you know, find out, learn stuff, meet old friends, and just have a great time this week in Austin. Thank you very much.